Welcome to the Probate Realtor Show, your one source for selling and buying real estate through trust and probate. Hear directly from the best attorneys and trusted advisors on how executors and administrators navigate the probate process in and out of court. Being a personal representative or successor trustee can be a daunting task, and often beneficiaries don't have a clear plan. Let us help you make the right decision for your clients, your family, and your legacy. And now, here's your host, the probate realtor himself, Matias Baker Masucci.
Welcome, everybody, to another very exciting episode. Today, we have a special guest, Liz Apodaca. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is exciting.
It's a pleasure to have you. We are talking. So Liz is a estate planning attorney who does trust administration and probate administration. Has been doing it for some time. And today we are talking about LGBTQ plus community, which is very near and dear to me. And I wanted to delve right into it. So Liz, one of the things that I guess it's on people's minds sometimes when they have to approach estate, planning, et cetera, marriage is a big part of it. And we know that the law has changed over the past 10 years with big Supreme Court decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So the first question I wanted to ask you is marriage equality really in full effect? Or are we still seeing some areas or some things where, it's not completely out there yet? How do you feel about this?
Okay, well, we do have same-sex marriage. It's the
Right.
law of the land in the United States. There's a lot of rumbling about how that potentially could go away. The
Right.
Supreme Court could take it away. In California, we have very strong rights, and I'm hopeful that that will continue because marriage does affect not only how you pay your taxes, but also the inheritance rights, and that's really where I come in on when someone is, well, it's inheritance. That's what we talk about.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let me ask you a question. Now, some people may have done estate planning prior to 2015, prior to that it became the law of the land, as you aptly said. With those people, what happened once the thing changed and then they could legally get married, I guess, they could have done the estate planning as domestic partners. Am I correct in assuming that?
Absolutely. Yes, you are absolutely correct. Domestic partners have very strong rights in California. So anything that's under that law, of course, it's never a bad idea to just take another look, make sure that everything is signed, all of the funds are transferred in. So if the trust is that old, more than 10 years, then I would just recommend like a little update anyway. But but the trust law itself, not the same-sex marriage law. I mean, it's a different set of laws that governs trusts, and that is pretty stable. So if there's something in writing, it's a contract that you make with yourself, so that's going to continue to exist.
Okay, that's perfect. That makes perfect sense. Now, when somebody is in a same-sex marriage or a same-sex relationship, what are the things, and they come to you and they wish to, start their journey in the estate plan. What are some of the things that you've noticed that may be a little bit different than when there are, different, couples of different sex? What are the things that you've noticed that some people may overlook that are important to keep in mind?
Yeah, so it has some of the things that people don't really like, they're not top of mind, are whether debt is shared, right? Like, does one person own the debt, or do they, as the couple, are they both responsible for it? So that's case by case, right? There's also issues with children. Sometimes one person is the biological parent and the other is not. And so those issues need to be addressed, especially if they're minor children. You want to make sure that the guardianships, the appropriate persons are named to be the guardians to handle their money. If they're the child of both, then it's kind of treated like a, I don't want to say regular, but it's just treated the same way that that families handle their affairs as far as their contracts go.
That makes perfect sense. Now, when we can also see things like blended families, for instance, right? Like somebody may have had a child from a previous marriage, and then, so in those circumstances, what is the advice? How do you protect I mean, I guess how you protect your current spouse. This applies to really any type of estate
Yes.
planning. How do you protect your current spouse? Make sure that they don't get, overlooked. If you have children from another marriage, what are some of the things that you recommend in somebody that finds themselves in that situation?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's very common, with many families, and it's very case by case. Some trust can be written so that property is distributed when the biological parent dies, even if the spouse is still living, right?
Right,
So other trusts can be set up so that the surviving spouse continues to have full control and can
right,
make changes to the trust and can use
okay,
that, the assets to
right,
pay for their care on an ongoing basis. And that would include, like, if they get remarried, right?
right,
Then they can transfer or they can take that property out of the trust and add a new, a later spouse to have
right,
control. So some families want to plan for that so that they can avoid any unintended consequences. But sometimes families want to just keep it as simple as possible, and they trust each other, and they're in a long-term marriage, and their children are joint children from the same relationship, and so they can make things a little bit more simplified. So I guess to answer your question, it really just depends on the situation. But the trust law is so flexible that it can accommodate that. So we can put anything in writing that the family, well, I shouldn't say anything. I'm a lawyer, right? But
yeah,
I would say that, for their situation, we can customize documents. Now, at the end of life, right? Then it's up to the person who's named as the successor trustee to then be
right,
responsible for following the instructions in the trust. So that's not always something we can control. We just
right,
want to advise our clients, what the responsibilities will be for that successor trustee. We have a workshop once a month where any successor trustee can come in and kind of learn
oh,
on
nice,
what those responsibilities would be, what they're going to be required to do. And so it's really a matter of like choosing the right person. So we tried to guide the person, like for example, if it's an adult child that lives with the parents and they want to name that person, that child, as their successor trustee, well, that might not work because they might have, an idea of staying in the house and not selling it, as
right,
opposed to the rest of the family, that the other children might want that house sold so they can get their inheritance, which they're entitled to. So there can be a lot. I mean, that's why I love what I do. Every family is different, every story is different. And with same-sex couples, a lot of the stories, they kind of fall under the same guidelines. The important thing to know is that the law protects property ownership and inheritance rights. So that's what I want to make sure that people understand.
Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things in there that I really want to dig a little bit deeper. So one of the things you said and you brought up, and I think it's important, is you're talking about the nuances. You're talking about the nuances in the trust. And that is, I think, during our show, during all the episodes that we've done, we've talked about the self-help, like when people are trying to do their own trust with
Mhm.
LegalZoom or whatever the thing is, which if you think about it, when you have limited control over what's in the document because you're using a template, boilerplate, when the trust activates, when it really happens, you may not necessarily want what the consequences are that you have set forth in a document that was just a
Yeah.
template. So
Yes.
what I'm understanding here, and I think this really applies, I think it's particularly important for the LGBTQ community, because one of the they want choices. They've made life choices, and they want to have all these nuances. And I think that's why it's so important to have somebody like you who kind of like is able to guide them and say, look, these are your options. Let's explore them. So I guess the first question that I wanted to ask you in this regard is, how do you bring these things up during a consultation? Because there are so many things and so many scenarios. How do you provide the options to the clients that come to you?
Well, we first start with getting to hear the story and the goals, right? I mean, we don't need to have all the fairy tale details about, the romance and how they got together.
Right.
That's fun, but it's really about like what are their ultimate goals? Who is going to receive the property when we're no longer here to enjoy it ourselves, right? So that's kind of the thing. And then sometimes it just does come up. I mean, we do have our list of questions. One of them is, are there children from a prior relationship, a different relationship?
Right.
And if we don't ask that, you'd be surprised. Sometimes that comes up,
Right.
oh, by the way. And then I have also dealt on the back end of trust during the trust administration process where we've got a trust and it says, oh, I have one child. And then come to find out there were like a couple of other children that the person, they just didn't want them named in the trust because they didn't want them to have any rights. But that could cause some problems, with invalidating. Now these other children have, potential to bring a claim against the trust, make it invalid. So we really have to be very careful about getting all of those details up front, making sure that everything is disclosed. It's got to be transparent. And then the trust itself is going to be very strong as far as being able to withstand any kind of opposition or any kind of attack. And ultimately, again, it just depends, like I was saying before, it depends on the trustee that's named as the successor trustee to really like follow the instructions in the trust because there's no court oversight on this. And so that's really going to be so important at the initial meeting to really try to like figure out and make sure that we're talking about like the right person to administer the trust, not just the oldest child, not just the male child. It's the person that is the most appropriate, the most trustworthy, the most capable, responsible. All those things are so important. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but
No, I think
yeah.
you have. I mean, I think it's part of your intake process. Basically, you're saying that,
Yes.
like we ask the questions. We don't know everybody's story. Everybody's story is unique. So the way you approach it is with a mindful knowledge that, we have to dig up. Like you said, we don't need to know the fairy tales about the relationship, but you do need to know if there is other son. And, in this show, we've actually talked quite a bit about disinheritance and how disinheritance clauses are very delicate, because it's difficult, like just you can't just write somebody off, or in the example of not even mentioning the existence of a child
Yes.
from a previous marriage. That is for sure, if they are intelligent enough, they would challenge the trust, of course, because they weren't even mentioned in it. You're better off, and this is from interviewing so many attorneys, everybody has their own way, but you're better off giving them a nominal amount and say this is what you get, and they not enough. What was the thing that came up? Not enough to fight, and just enough to be content.
Yes. Yes. So, and all the trusts, we include the no contest provision, we include arbitration clause, we try to make it as efficient as possible. But, back to your point earlier about the boilerplate, like the LegalZoom and all those are, I don't want to discount them. They can be very low cost, and I am all in favor of access to everyone, right? Everyone who is a homeowner, should have a trust. Everyone who is an adult should have a financial and medical power of attorney. Those are just documents that every person needs. And if all they can afford is LegalZoom, then that's fine. But I would say that for more complicated situations, it's better to have a customized consultation. And then also, I have had situations where someone brings me their LegalZoom trust, and it's in a fancy binder. That's the thing about LegalZoom. They'll upsell, till you just stop clicking yes, right? So fancy binder, but no notaries. Nothing had been signed. So of course it was not even in effect. So, and these are people that had money to pay for an attorney, but I'm kind of going off track. I don't want to get on a rant about LegalZoom. I think that it's great for,
no, but it's important. I mean, ultimately what we're doing here is educating people. So I agree with you 100%. Absolutely. If your choice is a template over zero, then get the template. But if you can afford it, then get something that truly you communicates your wishes, because it's important, for what is to happen when you pass, because we're all heading in that direction, some of us sooner than others, but ultimately, you want to make sure that the people you care about are taken care of while, when you are gone. So I think that's a very important point. Another thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is in relationship also to something you said before, about educating, LGBTQ couple about, who to select to be the successor trustee. And I think that is very important because, like we all have ideas of who we think should be the successor trustee. But really, I encounter this in real estate a lot because, I sell a lot of real estate through trust and probate. And being a successor trustee can be a thankless job. So you got to make sure, especially if they're not beneficiaries. So you got to make sure that whoever you select, or if there's multiple children and all of that, how do you help someone make the right decision?
Ultimately, it's their decision.
Of course.
I have to decide. I cannot really push them one way or the other. It's really about, like I said, the education process of making sure that they understand, the consequences of what they do, right?
Right.
The choices that they make are so important for the long term. There's so many, cautionary tales, I guess, of what not to do. And so sometimes, most of the time our consultations are pretty straightforward. Same sex couples, every couple, it's
Right.
it's pretty straightforward. We're talking about their goals. Sometimes it gets a little emotional, just because, our bodies are not wired to think about dying, right?
Right.
So it can be a little bit emotional, but at the end of the day, we really just want them to understand what they're doing, what happens, what the person that they name, the trustee, will be responsible for, what happens with the beneficiary, what happens with taxes. I want to focus on the LGBTQ that I want to reassure families that they have the power to make these choices, to decide the future for their children, for their families. I have a lot of lesbian friends that don't have children, by choice. And
Right.
most of my gay men friends, they don't have children by choice, right?
Right.
So they need to make a choice on what really is going to happen with their property. And sometimes there's a bit of a conflict between the couple. And when I represent both, it's a joint representation. So I'm consulting with both. And at the end of the day, though, to answer your question, it's really their choice. They have to come
Right.
to that agreement with each other. And we can't predict the future. We don't know, maybe my child is gonna run off to Africa. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, we just don't know whether our children are going to be available, whether our friends that we select, whether they're going to want to do this. We don't know if there's going to be, a spouse of our successor trustee who's going to kind of get in the way and cause a few problems there. I mean, all these things can happen, and it's just because we are human. We are human.
Right.
So, but we
Yeah.
do our best, right, to get everything on paper that matches what the wishes are, and to get that,
Thank
in
you.
writing. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. I am going to add, so now it takes me to another aspect of your business, which is the administration of the
Yeah.
trust. And I think that's equally important, as if not even more important, because you said, a trust doesn't have court oversight, right? It's not like a probate, especially with limited authority, where the court checks on the process. But in this case, when the deceased, becomes the deceased, and when the trust gets activated, your clients are not alone. And I think that's important. That's important when you do estate planning and administrator as well. So let's talk about first of all, how is usually how is the process? Like somebody calls you and says, Liz, they call you in tears, this has happened. We need to do, what do I do? I'm assuming you get those calls, and what happens on your end?
Yes. So, they generally will make an appointment. We'll come in and we'll sit down and talk, or they may want to just attend our little class, right? Which
Mhm.
is free for everyone.
Good.
And if they choose to hire us to help, um, many families do it on their own, right? When you have a trust, a lot of times it's very straightforward. They're gonna sell real estate. They're gonna open the bank accounts,
Right.
so they deal with their CPA or their tax preparer. They deal with their real estate agent and their financial, their bank, and then they're good. But for those who choose to make sure that, everything is done properly, and there are some notices and things that many families overlook if they're going to do it themselves. So we can help them with that. We have a checklist of all the things that, if there's real estate, there's certain forms that go to the assessor. We don't want property taxes to be reassessed unnecessarily. I mean, sometimes that's just a fact of what the law is and their situation, so they'll have to be. But we kind of coordinate. We don't take over as trustee, right? The trustee becomes our client, and then we just guide them, right? If they need the tax ID, we'll get that for them. We'll send out the notices. We'll send out the trustee notice. And then ultimately the goal is to undo the trust, right? That you want to take everything out. So that's the goal is sell the property, the real estate, deal with the personal property, get appraisals as needed, and then ultimately distribute. So we help with the accounting of that, because every beneficiary has a right to know what's happening with the trusts. And so they have a right to an accounting. And so we can help set that up so that the trustee is now protected from liability against either another beneficiary or the taxing authorities or the county. The trustee is now set up to be fully protected because everything's documented and done correctly. So that's a service that we offer.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about your journey, because I
Okay.
find it fascinating. I mean, you've been, I believe, running your firm since 2010, correct?
Yeah. So my official anniversary is coming up, 15 years. I celebrate 15 years, like the official launch would be March 17th.
Yes.
I don't know if you noticed, I use a lot of clovers in my
Yeah.
branding, and that goes back to my brother who died in 2009. His birthday was March 17th, so he's a St. Patrick's Day boy. And if I could just take a moment, I'd
Absolutely.
like to tell this story because one of those cautionary tales. Many people don't know that. Well, what happened? Sorry, he was at Lake Havasu on the 4th of July on a
Okay.
boat. It was 114 degrees. He dove into the lake or the river. I don't know, but he dove in. And my brother was a really good swimmer. He's a surfer. He probably didn't even put his arms out to dive in. He just put his head in the water and went down. And the sheriff told me it happens every year. So if you go to Lake Havasu, if you're out there and you go to Lake Havasu, be aware you can't just dive in. Your feet have to go in first, because that way your brain understands that it's going to be cold. So from 114 degrees, it's like 50 or 60 degrees, just under the water. And our brains, tell us that's no good. He passed out. He died on the 4th of July. So
Oh,
I honor him with my clover because of his birthday. But
I want to tell you something. My daughter's name is Clover.
oh, how
Yes.
beautiful.
So
Yeah,
I have this. Clover is also a special meaning in our lives.
I love
That's
it.
Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
So that
started
kind
your
of inspired me to go into estate planning. My brother had a
Mhm.
very simple life. He wasn't married, had no kids, didn't have a lot of possessions, but it's just the idea that it- we experience loss,
Right.
and I just feel it's so much more rewarding than fighting over other people's money, which is what I used to do. I used to
Mhm.
be a litigator, and
Right.
it's a harsh lifestyle. You gotta I worked for big firms, not here but in Hawaii, and you take what the clients are given to you by the partners. That's how they make their money, and
Right.
and it was a good living, but it was also like super stressful. So I I love mentoring new attorneys who want to go into this area of practice because, it's totally a lifestyle where you can have control and help people out. Everybody, I said this before, every adult needs every homeowner needs a trust, every adult needs their financial and medical power of attorney. So I would like to one day maybe start a nonprofit where people who cannot afford those documents, we could help them out as well. That would be a dream of mine. And I just love what I do. So happy to be
That's
here.
awesome. That's awesome. Tell me about, so this is quite a life change. You were licensed in Hawaii as well. So
Yeah.
so did you used to live there? Is that what it is? Obviously you lived
Yes.
there.
So I grew up here in Whittier, which is where my office is. And I went off to college and then I was in the travel industry. That
Okay.
took me to Texas. And then from there, through the travel industry, I got a job as kind of like a operations director at a Hawaii hotel chain. So I moved to Hawaii and then I went to law school there after a few years.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I went to law school, my kids were little. But it was a great experience there. I love Hawaii. It's beautiful. I lived there 15 years. That's where I got my start. I clerked for an appellate judge. That was amazing. And then I worked for big law firms. I learned a lot. And then, life situations happened, divorce, my brother died, all these things kind of happened around 2009, 2010. And so I ended up back in my hometown. And I don't know if you remember, I kind of have blocked it, but the whole economy crashed in
Right.
2009,
Yeah, that's
2010.
right.
So I was fortunate to not get a job, so I had to start on my own. So here I am, 15 years later, and it's just, yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So
That's
still
awesome.
going. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Now let's
Yeah.
talk about the LGBTQ community and what got you
Yes.
interested in it, because that's an important aspect. We gave some tips and advice. We only
Yes,
obviously just scratched the surface,
we
but
did.
what makes it special for you, and what is your relationship in with the community,
Yeah,
etc.
I'm very connected with the LGBTQ community,
Hmm.
and I'm not in a same-sex relationship myself. I'm single, but but I just have so many friends, and I have so many friends who have concerns about the situation that we are living through today, and I just want to reassure families the law applies. Even um, well, any unmarried couple can have property and own it
Right.
together. I mean, even like a mother and child can own property together. It doesn't
Right.
have to be, that we are saying the laws specifically for same-sex couples.
Right.
But my passion is that I want people to plan
Mhm.
because I see the situations where people have, a partner, a long-term partner for years and years, and if one owns a home and the other one's not on title, and then the homeowner dies, the surviving partner is left with having to deal with a lot of times family will come in, like maybe there's family that disapprove of the relationship. And again, doesn't have to be just same-sex couples, but this
Mhm.
happens with every couple, that there could be family that disapprove of the relationship, and they become very entitled over property that their biological family member owned, and then the partner is just left out, and a lot of times they lose their home, right? And so I've seen these kind of situations
Right.
where people don't plan, and for unmarried couples, same sex or not, unmarried couples, there are no inheritance rights. We live in a community property state, so there's
Right.
no common law marriage. Doesn't matter how long you're together, how long you live together. In divorce, that's when it matters, community property. And sometimes people can assert rights of ownership if they've contributed to property. But when someone's passed away, that option goes away, right? The living partner, the surviving, unmarried spouse has no rights whatsoever. They can't control where that person is buried.
Right.
They can't, inherit. They just have nothing that they can
And
do.
this is why it's so important also to have a
Yeah.
medical directive. I
Yes.
think you talked
Yes.
about it. This is extremely important because if something happens and somebody becomes incapacitated, even
Yes.
in those circumstances, you really want to make sure you get to decide, who's in charge, if you have to go in a conservatorship or something like that. So that's
Yes.
definitely extremely important. So thank you for bringing that up because
Yes.
an estate plan is a comprehensive, I know my audience is familiar with it. And so that, I don't necessarily every show, we don't go through the entire document, but it's not just the trust. It's not just the pour over will. It's got a lot of components. And I think it's very important to become aware of what they are and why you need them.
Yes. And, the purpose is to keep you out of the courts, right?
Right.
So whether you're alive but incapacitated or deceased, you don't want to be in the probate court. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I tell this to all my clients all the time. Probate is a public matter, right?
Mhm.
So once you file for probate, everybody knows about it. And that's where people come out of the woodwork and there's a lot of scams. You receive a lot of mailers that are spam. I mean, like on and on and on and on. When you have your estate plan in place, it's private. You get to handle it with your family. You get to handle it instead of having, all these barrage of, I mean, I can tell you nightmare stories. I've been in this space for a long time. So, just now it's happening with a client. The father had a nice real estate investment portfolio with tenants. And they find out that the probate is being filed. So attorneys go to the tenants and try to file lawsuits against the estates. I mean, it's unpleasant. So,
Yes, we live in a due process society, and I strongly believe in that, right? We all have our rights. But sometimes people do abuse that privilege
right.
and try to enforce rights that they really, they do it just to extort money pretty much,
Yeah.
to get a settlement.
We call
So
them the shakedowns, the shakedown
the
demand
shakedown,
letters,
there you
the
go.
shakedown demand letters. You can spot them like when they're right. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
this is such a shakedown
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
expensive to litigate. That's the truth of the matter. There's still a lot of
that's the
people of
truth.
principle out there. There's a lot of people of principle who would rather litigate rather than settle what is considered frivolous. But anyway, that's for another show. What I
Mhm.
want to finish with is, actually, I wanted to give a plug. You have myattorneyla.com. That's your website, right? Great
Yes,
domain, by the way. I love it.
thank you. Thank you.
So tell us, if somebody needs help, wants to reach you, first of all, tell us about those seminars. How do people join? They're once a month, you said. Are they advertised somewhere? I would love to plug that and put that link into our show notes.
Oh, I appreciate that. So there we update the flyers on our website,
Nice.
and the flyers have the phone number. Someone, if they want to register for a seminar, and that includes the regular estate planning seminar. We do those like every couple of weeks too. I'm trying to get it posted up onto my website, so that video will be coming soon. And
Good.
then, we give people a discount if they off their estate plan if they either watch my video or come in person to an estate plan seminar because it answers a lot of questions, right?
That's great.
And it's kind of fun for me to talk about this stuff. But the same thing with the trust administration, those seminars, we only do those once a month, but the flyer is on our website.
Nice.
People just need to call and let us know, because if no one signed up, I'm not showing up, right?
Of course.
So they should come in, or they should call, and then we have it in person in our office. We can do a virtual seminar if that's requested. But it's just general information, right? We can't give specific legal advice to a crowd of people, or
Right.
we just can't do that without knowing all of the details. But it's something, because most people just don't know what it entails, right? When I first started doing this 15 years ago, it was like, oh, that's for people who have a lot of wealth. And I mean, that was the pushback that I got is, I don't have enough money. The bank owns my house. I don't really own my house. But, so there's a lot of misinformation out there. And we just really just want to clear that up. So that's my goal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the show and fighting the good fight of putting the information out there, which I think is very important. If somebody needs to get a hold of you, Liz, what is the best way to reach you to ask for a consultation?
Yeah.
The website is one. Is that the best place?
Well, my phone number is on the website. The best place is to call my phone number, 562-693-5027. That's my phone number. And we have someone answering 24/7. Now, during the middle of the night, all they're going to do is take a message. But, generally during the day, we have somebody here that can schedule an appointment if that's what we need. If it's just a quick question, we can, figure out how to respond. But that's the best way.
Great. All right. Wonderful. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Liz. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on yet another episode. I think we are in the 80s now, episode number 80 something. So we really keep up we're doing a good job here. And we're certainly glad that Liz has joined us. And we will see you in the next episode. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Probate Realtor Show. Find more episodes and interact with us at probaterealtor.la. That's probaterealtor.la. Listen, ask questions, and get results. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The Probate Realtor Matias Baker Masucci is a licensed real estate broker in California, DRE number 020547763. Any legal information provided is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. Contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal issue or problem. We make no guarantees as to the accuracy of any information. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.